My 28 female boyfriend, 28 male, of 8 years cheated on me with his best friend's fiancé and is now begging me for a second chance. I still love him, but I don't know what to do. Throwaway cause our friends follow my main account and I don't want them to know about this. Background: I met my boyfriend in college when we had a class together. He was struggling because of his party lifestyle, but me, being a studious introvert, was thriving. He begged me to help him and I relented eventually. I hated his guts, but, for some reason, he made me fall in love with him. He was such an open book too and waited patiently for me. I didn't let him kiss me till 4 months into dating and didn't sleep with him till our 1-year anniversary. He was my first and I really wanted to be sure I was giving my virginity to someone who truly loved me. I didn't ask him to, but he slowly gave up partying and drinking for me and we both found a new friend group in college who we've maintained to this day. He gave up everything willingly because he said he'd rather spend time at home with me. The one thing from his past that he didn't give up, though, was his childhood best friend who we'll call Max. Max always hated me. I think he blames me that he sees my BF only a few times a month and that he isn't fun anymore. He also openly questions our relationship in front of both of us and says stuff like you'll come to your senses eventually when talking to my BF. I told him I wasn't comfortable, so since then, he never let Max around me, but they still hung out and I really didn't mind because I trusted him. Okay, so this is what happened recently. Max got engaged to his long-term on again off again GF and invited both of us over to celebrate. It would have been just the 4 of us. Restrictions have been lifted in our area as long as contact and amount of people involved were kept to a minimum. I declined, which, in retrospect, was a big mistake. BF offered to stay with me, but I told him he didn't need to and I'd understand if he wanted to support Max, even though I despised the guy. Again, this was a mistake in retrospect. The next morning BF came home crying. We are living together. He was still clearly hungover, so I bathed him and put him to bed. When he woke up a few hours later, he told me everything. Apparently, he got really drunk at the party. Max's fiancé, who I guess I'll call Homewrecker or HM, was very flirty with him the whole night and helped him when he passed out. Next thing BF says he remembers was when he woke up, HM was giving him a BJ while he was naked. He says he was too drunk and just went along with it while Max watched. According to BF, they are into the whole hot wife thing, whatever that means. Next thing BF says he remembers was waking up naked next to HM with a bunch of used condoms around them. He rushed home after that. My heart is breaking right now, guys, and I really don't know what to do. He's been begging me for a second chance, even showing me he blocked Max and HM on everything. He promised never to contact them again. He also swears to not drink when I'm not around anymore and that he'd keep his phone unlocked and I can look through it whenever I wanted, no questions asked. He kept telling me how much he regrets it and how much he loves me and that I'm the only one. Sad thing is, I believe him. This man was my first everything and I feel like my world is just crumbling around me. A few weeks ago, we were thinking about getting married and how many kids we wanted. Now, I can't even look at him without my heart breaking in two. This all happened a few days ago and I've barely left the room. He's giving me space, but he's also doing the little things that makes me fall for him again. He keeps the house clean. He's been cooking me the food I like and leaving short love notes beside it on the dinner table. I'm lost right now. I so desperately want to forgive him, but every time I look at him, I can't shake off the image of him being with another woman. I know I was never his first, but he kept promising me I was going to be his last, and he broke it. Despite everything though, deep down I still love him. Guys, I don't know where to go from here. I'm crying just typing this out, but I don't have anyone to talk to about this. Usually, when problems this big come up in my life, has the one I turn to for help. I love him, but I don't know if I can trust him anymore. What should I do? Will couples counseling help? Should I just cut my losses and end it? He seems very remorseful and he did confess to the whole thing immediately after. Should I give him a chance? Sorry for the long rant. I'm just lost right now. Update. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for those who gave me really solid advice in my last post. A lot has happened in the last few days. Sorry I haven't been replying to any of you, I just didn't think I was in the right headspace to actually hold a meaningful conversation. Rest assured I did read all of your replies. Even the really mean ones. So where do I begin? Well, I think some of you would be delighted to know that he left me for not being supportive. Sucks to be me, I guess. I guess you guys were right, I am a sucky girlfriend. He's now off to be with his brand new supportive GF. Nah, just kidding, but some of you would have wanted that to happen, right? So, here's what really happened. After reading some of your comments, I started to see things from a different perspective. I never really thought of it as anything other than cheating, and it didn't help that, when he came home to me that morning, he claimed to have cheated on me, and I guess my mind just started going to a dark place, where logic goes out of the window. It's definitely not an excuse, but I really wasn't in the right mindset after he said he cheated. I guess it was after the realization that this man would never willingly hurt me is when all the anger and pain of being cheated on was washed away. I couldn't really bring myself to talk to him at first. He was on the couch blankly staring at whatever was on TV. He looked empty. I sat beside him and told him I had no intentions of breaking up. Well, he came to life almost instantly, and before I knew it, his arms were wrapped around me. He was shaking, and I could tell he was crying. I was too. Remember when I said I felt my world was crumbling around me? Well, for the first time in what seemed like forever, I could feel it starting to fall back into place. I didn't realize how much a simple embrace can be so calming. Everything was starting to feel right again. Then we talked. He apologized again for cheating, and when I told him I didn't think he cheated, he had a puzzled look on his face. I asked him if he gave consent, and he said no. I tried to explain I guess he still doesn't realize that he was actually taken advantage of. He said the first thing that came to mind after what happened was that he cheated and was so afraid of losing me. This man, after being raped, first thought of how much he betrayed me instead of how he was betrayed himself. I was floored. He said his first response had to be to win me back, which is why he's been going the extra mile the last few days taking care of me from a distance. When it was my turn to speak, I told him how sorry I was for not being supportive. I jumped to conclusions without actually thinking about it clearly, which was pretty out of character for me. A few more exchanges after that, and the conversation shifted to Max and HM. I told him that I never wanted him anywhere near Max or her again, and he agreed. I've always thought he was a bad influence, but I never thought he'd take it this far, so I never stopped him from seeing his ex-best friend. He showed me his phone, which didn't have a lock anymore. He said he blocked both of them on everything but wanted to keep the open phone policy. He said it's so I can be sure he isn't back in touch with Max. I urged him to file a police report, but he was against it. He said that even if he was raped, he couldn't bring himself to do it. I didn't really know about it at first, but his family and Max's family had a very long history of friendship. Their moms were college best friends, and their dads worked together. Not only were the two of them close, even their families were close. I thought they were just neighbors, but it was more than that. I didn't know cause every time I visit his family. The topic was never brought up, and I haven't really met any of Max's family, except for his little sister who came by to play with BF's little brother. He said he didn't want to ruin decades of friendship and would be content with just going no contact with Max. He's getting tested later today, and I hope that B didn't give my man anything. I'm also pretty confident my BF didn't get HM pregnant cause Max absolutely hates children, so I'd imagine HM would be on birth control given how many dudes she sleeps with. BF and I came to the conclusion that Max most likely set the whole thing up to break us apart so he can have his best friend back. They used to be partners in crime after all, when it came to parties and picking up women. I would like to point out that I did not force him to change. He himself chose to do so, but I know he did it for me, which just makes me fall in love with him even more. When we first met, he was still the playboy party animal he was, but he told me, after hanging out with me for a few weeks, that he didn't really feel like sleeping around anymore. I didn't really believe him at first, obviously. I've also noticed that a few people were bashing me for making him wait 1 year for sex. I'm sorry, I just have different views. I believe that sex is for people who love each other, so I wasn't willing to sleep with anyone I wasn't deeply in love with and didn't love me back. I don't judge people who sleep around. My BF has a high body count, but I don't really hold it against him. But back then, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't just a girl he bangs or a conquest, but someone who he actually loves and sees a future with. Considering his past, I was very skeptical for a while and I had my walls up the entire time, but he slowly tore them apart, and I'm glad he did. That reluctant yes when he first asked me out was, and still is, one of the best decisions I've ever made. Max's plan had the opposite effect. It's rough now, but I can see this experience making our relationship even stronger. I love him more than ever, believe it or not, and I'm sure he feels the same way. The last few days have taught us both how our lives would be without the other. I guess it made us value each other more. Not that either of us took the other for granted. And yes, we are both getting therapy. Both individually and as a couple. To be honest, I'm still shaken over the whole thing. Even when we cuddle, I can still imagine HM having her way with him, and I can't help but cry about it. If I'm still shaken up by the whole thing, I can only imagine how much worse it is for him, but I'll be there for him every step of the way. I know he didn't cheat. I know he won't break my heart. I know that he loves me. I know that I love him. It's hard right now, but knowing those facts makes me confident we can see this through. One Redditor pointed out that we were soulmates, and I like to think that we are. I can't see myself being with anyone but him. Thanks again for all your advice and for making me see things differently. I'll try to reply and answer questions when necessary and when I can. My 28 female dog attacked my stalker after he broke into my house. Now my 32 female says my dog is too dangerous to be around my niece, 4 female. Feel like I'm going crazy. This is kind of a complicated story, but I'll just get into it. I used to be in this controlling, kind of abusive relationship. When I finally broke it off a year ago, my ex started showing up places, trying to get me to take him back. Eventually, it developed into full-on stalking. He would show up at my work and took to just waiting outside of it after he was banned, leave notes on my car when I was at the grocery store, leave all kinds of flowers outside my house, and then stick angry notes on my door after he saw me throw them in the trash, wrote me all kinds of weird, obsessive emails and letters. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. The behavior escalated over time and got scarier, more threatening. In one instance, he started a small fire in my driveway, but the police couldn't get enough evidence connecting him to it. It was after that instance that I put cameras in my yard. I previously only had them pointing at my doors. I was horrified to learn that the police couldn't do anything out any of this until my stalker actually was caught doing something illegal, like breaking into my house. At which point, I might already be dead. I decided I wasn't spending the rest of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, so I got a handgun and a concealed carry permit, took some self-defense courses, and started doing strength training. I also looked into getting an attack dog, but after all the money I'd sunk into my other methods of protection, they were prohibitively expensive. So, I went to my local animal shelter and got the scariest, meanest looking dog I could find. This is where Thor comes in. He's a 100-pound American bulldog, looks like he'd rip your throat out on sight, but is basically a gigantic teddy bear. He loves every person he's ever met, is incredibly sweet and gentle with my 4-year-old niece, enjoys other animals, and even loves the mailman. I just kind of accepted that he probably wouldn't do anything to protect me from my stalker, but it didn't matter that much because having such a huge dog made me so much more confident. I brought Thor everywhere I could and was working on getting him trained enough to be an emotional support animal so I could bring him inside places with me. I absolutely would not do this until he was trained well enough to not disrupt a regular service dog. Last month, I woke up in the middle of the night to Thor whining. I was groggy and thought he had to go to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and opened the door. At that point, my house alarm went off, and pretty soon after that, I was face to face with my stalker. I started screaming and went to run for my gun. Before I could do anything though, Thor ran across the room in full attack mode. The memory is really blurry for me, but there was blood all over my living room, and I remember my stalker was eventually able to escape, at which point Thor chased him outside and then came back to me. When the police showed up, they said Thor was a hero who'd probably saved my life. I don't want to list what they found in my stalker's car after they caught him, and I'm shaking a little as I type this, but I'm sure he was going to bring me somewhere and kill me. It looks like he's going to prison for a long time though, so my nightmare is over. Pretty much everyone in my life thinks Thor is a hero, except my Sil. She and my brother have a 4yo, the one I mentioned above, and she says she doesn't want Thor around her, the child, anymore. She says since Thor has snapped in the past, he could do it again, so he's not safe to have around kids. We used to see each other a few times a week before she decided Thor was dangerous. The way she words this makes me really angry because Thor didn't snap. He saw a stranger break into his home, heard his owner scream in terror, and reacted to defend me, himself, and his house. Nothing about that screams dangerous around children to me, unless my niece is also going to break into my house and threaten me. This is also a very emotional issue for me, because Thor isn't just a dog to me. He's my safe place, my hero, the one who protected me and kept me safe when no one else could. I've also gotten increasingly anxious since this happened, and I can't go anywhere without Thor. I barely leave my house, pay to pick up my groceries from the store instead of going in, because I know Thor isn't allowed inside, and all my friends know that. If Thor isn't welcome in their house, I'm not coming either, although they're perfectly welcome to come hang out at my house instead. I am really going through it, and I'm working with a therapist to overcome this. Luckily my office is still fully remote, but I need to be able to go back to work once we're in person again. But I really need my brother and Sil's support. I think my Sil thinks I'm just pouting, and that's why I won't just leave the dog home and come over without him. I don't know how to explain to them that the fear hasn't stopped just because my stalker is in jail. It's actually a lot worse than it was before. I've already suggested they come over and I crate Thor, but that wasn't good enough for her. What can I do to make her understand the situation better? Update. I definitely didn't expect my last post to blow up the way it did. Thank you so much to everyone who commented. I appreciated that I got advice from all over the spectrum, from people who completely agreed with me to people who completely agreed with my Sil, and people who thought both of us had a point. It helped me see that the problem is more complicated than I thought, which helped me understand that my Sil wasn't just being a dick. It also helped me decide what things were and weren't fair to be angry about. I also appreciated seeing a few people comment making fun of me for needing my dog with me, and the majority of people yelling at them and saying I was acting pretty reasonably for someone who endured a violent attack. I don't want to be seen as someone delicate, and I'm glad that most people don't see me that way. Reading everyone's comments, I had this moment where I was like, yeah, they're right. I did almost get drug out of my house and murdered just a few weeks ago. Who the hell are these people to say how I should act? That felt really good, and I really appreciated it. Anyway, the conclusion I came to in all of this is that, while my Sil is well within her rights to protect her daughter, she went about it in a way that disrespected me, both as a friend and as a victim of a very recent violent attack. Both my parents and her parents live locally and babysit all the time. She and my brother could have easily dropped my niece off with them and came to visit. It probably would have been a while before I even noticed my niece wasn't coming around, at which point I would have been in a better place and more understanding that she was uncomfortable with her daughter around Thor. Regardless of what some people said about how my Sil and brother don't owe me anything and all their allegiance goes to their daughter, I simply do not feel that way. We were extremely close before this happened. I was always there for them and would literally drop plans to babysit my niece if my brother and Sil needed a night to themselves. The very least they could have done for me after I was almost kidnapped and murdered is trying to find some compromise. We went from seeing each other 3 times a week to pretty much not seeing each other at all. Even if they weren't okay with me crating the dog, they could have easily dropped their daughter off with grandma and grandpa for a few hours so I wouldn't feel completely isolated. I also have a yard, so they could have come over with her and we all could have hung out outside while Thor stayed inside. I've been upset about this for a while, but wasn't sure if I was right to be upset until so many people echoed that sentiment. So, I appreciate it. I invited my brother and Sil over. I promised it would only be an hour or 2 and insisted they leave my niece with my parents and tried to lay all this out without being confrontational or acting like a dick. To my surprise, my brother and Sil had no real understanding that I've been having a difficult time. They thought I was basically fine and everything in my life was more or less back to normal now that my stalker is in jail. I didn't get into it in my previous post, but during the year that I was stalked, I worked really hard to not show many outward signs of fear. I even made jokes about having a stalker. I knew people wouldn't want to hang out with someone who was constantly going on and on about some bad thing that was going on in their life, and I didn't want to be that person who was perpetually in crisis. And more than that, I just didn't want to always be thinking and talking about having a stalker. I wanted to not think about it as much as possible. So, I guess I might have come off as unaffected by the whole thing. I'm not sure if I totally buy that they didn't know I was going through something traumatic and that it was taking a huge toll on my mental state. I mean, I got a gun and paid for tactical training. I bought a home security system. I got active in self-defense classes and strength training, things that I previously had no interest in. Even if I wasn't walking around telling everyone how scared I was, I think anyone would have been able to tell. Plus, who just brushes off having their house broken into in the middle of the night? It seems crazy, and they don't seem so emotionally unintelligent that they'd think that. But both my brother and Sil did apologize for being insensitive, and when I pressed my Sil on why crating the dog isn't good enough, she eventually relented and said that it would be fine. It probably helped that the entire time they were over, Thor was asleep and loudly snoring in his crate. The paranoid part of me is convinced they just don't want to deal with me in a fragile state, made up an excuse about my dog, and are now just going to come up with some other excuse about why they can't see me. I invited them over for dinner in a few days and they're coming, so I guess I'll just have to see from there. I can't stress enough that these used to be my best friends, and I'm heartbroken to have not had their support. I've been trying to rely on my friends more now, and thankfully they've all been really supportive. I'm really lucky that this happened during the pandemic because nobody is getting frustrated with me that I've basically refused to leave the house for a month. They're all perfectly happy to pick up takeout and come over to watch TV for the 5th night in a row. In other news, yesterday I left my dog at home and drove around my block alone. I was shaking the whole time, but I did it. I keep trying to remind myself that I spent a whole year fighting back even though I was utterly terrified. I can't just lay down and die now that I'm so close to getting my life back.